And I knew I had to hit it out of the park because this is the first anthology. I'm only going to get one shot to make a first impression, right? That's the saying.
Welcome to You May Contribute a Verse. I'm Brenna Jennerette, Kidlit author of The Law of Birthdays, an Ella's Way honorable mention, and the upcoming nonfiction picture book, A Bike is Not Just a Bike, about how the bicycle helped to usher in the women's revolution, illustrated by Michelle Peoria, launching July 21st, 2026, and now available for pre-order. I'm joined by my co-host, Josh Munkin, dad, Kidlit author, and science communicator. This episode is proudly sponsored by Canadian children's book publisher Tealmore Press, where every book sold supports reforestation. Check out Tealmore's newest release, Butterfly Sea, written by Cynthia Mackey and illustrated by Marie-Laure Coué. The book is a beautiful cross between sibling relationships and gentle reflection. Check out this title and the full Tealmore catalog at tealmorepress.com, including titles like Naked, Fungi Are More Than Mushrooms, and Supermoon. Today's guest joins us for his second time on the show, Matt Forrest Esenwine. If you missed our first chat with Matt, make sure to go back through the archives to Chuck's calendar 2021. Holy cats, that's a lot has happened since then. That's so long ago. We talked about Matt's first go-around in putting together an anthology called A Universe of Rainbows, illustrated by Jamie Kristoff. We also chat about what it takes to put together an anthology at length. Matt has a lot of great insights here, so if you're planning on putting together an anthology, make sure to take a listen. We also chat about Matt's experience with having autism and how he navigates the publishing industry. Here's Matt's second verse.
Well, can you just repeat what you just said?
Yeah, right. Say it right back. Well, I wanted to say thanks for coming on again, because we had you on a couple years ago, and I saw that you were coming out with an anthology, which is why I reached out to see, just like I wanted to know everything about it. That sounds very cool. So that was sort of the impetus of the second invitation. So if you want to just jump in with that, that'd be amazing. I would love to hear about your new anthology and how it got started.
But also stop listening to this if you are out there and have not yet listened to the other conversation that we had with Matt in November of 2021, which is amazing to think that it was so long ago, more than 3.5 years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
Please continue.
Out of COVID at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, crazy.
And this book was actually still being put together even back then. So the book is called A Universe of Rainbows from Erdman's Books for Young Readers, and it's not only is it an anthology that I've put together, and I've been part of numerous anthologies over the years. Probably had 40 or more poems in different anthologies, like the National Geographic Book of Nature Poetry, or School People, Construction People, and all these different books. But this is like my own anthology that I'm putting together myself. But the illustrator's also here in New Hampshire. He's about an hour away from me, Jamie Kristoff, who's one of the nicest I'll ever meet in children's lit. He's a great guy. We've had coffee and we've chatted, and he's just a good guy. So it's really awesome. And I don't use that word a whole lot, but it is truly awesome that you've got both creators here in the state of New Hampshire, about an hour away. We're doing some bookstore visits together, doing a couple of library visits together. It's really cool. But we put this together, or I put it together. I put the proposal together back in early 2019. I had the idea for an anthology about rainbows, and I was trying to think of like all kinds of, not just rainbows like you would think of as rainbows, but gemstones creating rainbows, or the rainbow fish and the Gouldian finch and the rainbow lorikeet and peacock mantis shrimp and the peacock spider and rainbow scarabs and all these things, and Vinicunca, the rainbow mountain, or Canyo Crystallis, the river of five colors. They call it the Rainbow River.
Cool.
Rainbow Nebula in Orion. I was a big astronomy guy when I was in school. So there's all these rainbows. And I thought, that would be a cool concept for a poetry anthology. Because when you come up with an anthology idea, it's not just enough, or any kind of poetry collection idea, it's not just enough to have a theme. Like, it has to be a theme that kids are going to care about, or they're going to want to read. So it has to have that kid value, right? It has to have the attraction to the young reader, but also has to work thematically. And And so I was talking with the late anthologist Lee Bennett Hopkins back in February of 2019 when I'd first come up with the idea, and we were talking on the phone about how to go about it, because I'd never done it. I'd been in multiple anthologies that Lee had done, but I'd never put one of mine together. And he gave me some ideas, and he was actually going to write the poem about the flower, which Rebecca Dottledge ended up writing the poem about the rainbow hibiscus. But that was going to be Lee's subject. Unfortunately, he passed away 6 months later, in August of 2019. And so he never knew that it was going to be dedicated to him. He didn't know any of this. I hadn't even sold it at that point. So it wasn't until March of 2020 or April of 2020, I got a message from Kathleen Mers, my editor at Erdman's, and she said, they loved the idea and they wanted to purchase it and make it into a book. So we signed the contract. I think it was like May 2020. So it was a nice little bright little rainbow, in the middle of COVID. But yeah, so it's taken 6 years from conception, which was right around the end of January, like the last few days of January 2019. I was taking part in Tara Lazar's Story Storm, where you come up with a picture book idea every day. And so it was like the 29th or 30th of January that I came up with the idea. I talked to Lee in February, and then 6 years later, we finally actually have the book. So it takes a while sometimes.
It has been a while, and that's an egregious while compared even with the timelines that we usually work with. Did you have an expectation at that point when you sold the anthology idea that it would come out this late in 2025?
I honestly had no idea. Some books will take 2 to 3 years, which is kind of average. If everything is working, all the pieces are connecting. You're probably looking at 2 to 3 years sometimes. 2 years is about as fast as a picture book can come out. When you consider it could take up to a year just to get the illustrations, But we signed right at the height of COVID, right? A couple of months after COVID struck, we were still trying to figure out what the virus was capable of doing and what it was. We didn't have vaccines, we didn't have anything like that, and so I had no idea when it was going to come out. It did take a little bit longer than I was kind of maybe expecting, but I really didn't know what to expect because, again, it was the great unknown. Everything was going, even in 2021, things were still moving slowly. I had a book that I sold in 2021, I Am Today, which I sold to Pow Kids Books, and that was actually, they fast tracked that. That was I sold that in I think it was the summer of 2021, and they put a publishing date of, I think it was October. No, I'm sorry. Sold it the summer of 2020. We put a date of October 2021 for a publication date, so just a little over a year. But because of supply chain issues, it got delayed, and then it got delayed again, and it got delayed again, and it got delayed like 5 or 6 times, and it ended up not coming out until spring of 2022. But that was a year and a half. Like, even with the delays, that was a year and a half. That was still
pretty good, right?
Wicked fast, as we say in New England. It was wicked fast because, when you consider COVID and supply chain, and to still have it only be like a year and a half or so, that was still pretty fast. So, you just never can tell. People will ask me, well, how long does it take to make a book? I tell them, I don't know.
How long you got?
Right. It takes as long as it takes. My book, The Thing to Remember About Stargazing, which was published by Tilbury House in October of 2023, that started off as a poem for a Paul Ginesco anthology, which came out posthumously. Paul actually passed away just about 6 months prior to Lee Bennett Hopkins. So we lost two fantastic anthologists all in the same year. So he had this book called The Proper Way to Greet a Hedgehog and Other How-To Poems. And I wrote this poem about stargazing for that book, but it didn't make it into the book, and I never knew why it didn't make it into the book. Paul, he passed away. I didn't even realize he was on hospice. I didn't even realize it. And then within hours of me finding out he was in hospice, he passed away. So I never knew why the poem didn't make it into his anthology. But a mutual friend of ours, Rebecca K. Dottledge, had read the poem, and she really liked it. She said, well, maybe you could flesh it out into like maybe as a picture book manuscript. And so I did, and I submitted it, and it went through 25 rejections before it finally got picked up by Tilbury House. And the editor at Tilbury House, he emailed me, said, "Oh, I love this manuscript. It's sparse, it's lyrical, it's witty, and it leaves plenty of room for an illustrator." And I remember thinking, well, that's exactly how I've been pitching it to the last 24 places.
Right. It just takes the one to see the vision, right?
So if you say, okay, well, from the time I wrote the poem until the time it actually became a book, that was 10 years. So 10 years and 25 rejections. You never know. I Am Today, I sent it off to my editor, who I already knew from working on the dinosaur book, Don't Ask a Dinosaur, same editor. So I knew her, and I sent the I Am Today manuscript to her at 2:30 in the afternoon, and at 4:35 she'd emailed me and said she wanted it. And then we fast-tracked it. Like I said, came out about a year and a half, which is 6 months later than they were expecting. But, 10 years, year and a half, I don't know. It is what it is.
And then some news turns around in the same afternoon. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can we circle back just really quick? I want to dig in a little bit to what does a proposal for an anthology look like? Because you had the idea and then you had sort of the contact. So what is that like? How did you strategize and write that and send it out? Did you have the illustrator on board? Like, tell us how that worked.
Yeah, so I did not know who the illustrator was going to be. When you're publishing traditionally, they don't want you to have an illustrator tied to the project. A publisher, if they purchase your manuscript or proposal, they will assign the illustrator. So I had no idea who that was going to be, and I never put an anthology proposal together. I knew what. I was shooting from my hip, really. I knew,
I love this.
Well, it really was. I knew all these other little things, and I just sort of had to combine what I knew from these different areas kind of into this project. I've been writing poetry forever. I've been writing since I was like 9 or 10. So I have a good sense of what makes a good poem. I got into children's writing. I think we talked about this the last time through poetry. I was never planning on writing picture books. That was never even a thought. I joined SCBWI and started making connections back in 2010, 2011, 2012 to find out how do I write or how do I get my children's poems published. And I wrote Flashlight Night, which turned out it was a poem, but it turned out it was actually a picture book manuscript. And just things have just sort of gone on from there. That's why most of my picture books are either poetic or lyrical, or they have a loose narrative. So I understood like what makes good poetry. I knew that the anthology had to have a solid theme, but it had to be, like I said, kid friendly. It had to be something that children would want to read about, and I knew that having a science tie-in, we would need sidebars, and I figured, well, I wouldn't want to put the sidebars in back matter, because if you're reading the poem, you're going to want to, if you don't know maybe some of the things that are referenced in the poem, you're going to want to be able to access that information like right there. You're not going to want to wait until you get back to flipping back and forth to a glossary or something like that. So I knew the sidebars would be with the poems, but in the back, I did want to have like a glossary and some areas for if you want to find more information on some of these. So I knew we were going to have some back matter, but the sidebars were going to be with the poem. So I had this vision of how it would be kind of put together, laid out. And I knew, being a new guy to the anthology scene, again, I've had a bunch of poems published, but never putting one together myself, and not being agented. I've got 12 books out. I have 2 more on the way. I can't find an agent, but I'm doing okay. So yeah. I got to submit this myself to the editors who I know, publishing houses that I know that appreciate poetry and do poetry anthologies. And I knew I had to hit it out of the park, because this is the first anthology. I'm only going to get one shot to make a first impression, right? That's right. That's the saying. And so I figured, well, I'm going to call on my friends who have participated in various other anthologies that I've participated in. And if I could put together a proposal with a page of saying, here's the plan, what do Vinnie Mountain, A Drop of Water, and the Rainbow Nebula have in common? rainbows. And I kind of prettied it up a little bit and made this kind of a couple of paragraph page pitch, and then I included a list of possible subjects along with potential poets who would be writing those. And I contacted several of my friends in advance. I said, "Hey, I'm putting this proposal together. If I'm able to sell it, would you be interested in writing a poem for it?"
Can I slap your name on the proposal?
right.
Can I commit you to this? Yeah.
Because and that's really how Lee did a lot of his anthologies. He would come up with the suggestions and say, "Okay, Matt, I'm doing a poetry anthology called Construction People. I would like you to write a poem about the construction project manager. Are you interested?" I'm like, "Well, sure. I mean, Lee would ask you to write a poem for one of his anthologies. The answer was always yes. But a lot of times he had the anthology premise sold because he was Lee Bennett Hopkins. So I had to pitch the anthology idea along with some of the names, and so I had Nikki Grimes and Marilyn Singer and Joyce Sidman and Georgia Hurd and Jane and Heidi and David Harrison and all these folks, Charles Guigne, and several of them. I don't know if Charles sent me one, but I had 4 or 5 of them sent me poems right off the bat that I could include in the proposal. So I could say, okay, here's the front page, here's the pitch, here are the suggested subjects and who some of the poets are who are going to be writing, and then here are a half dozen sample poems. So I had maybe a couple of poems that I'd written as part of the proposal, along with a couple of other folks who had written poems as well. So I was able to pitch this as, here's the premise, like Johnny Carson thing, right? You buy the premise, you buy the bit. So here's the premise, and here are some of the sample poems, so that a potential editor could see I knew what I was doing. They knew what I was doing.
Or at least get the impression, right?
Right. But like I did know what I was doing. I've never put an anthology together, but I felt like I actually did know what I was doing. I knew enough to be able to put the proposal together. I knew what an editor was going to be looking for. They want to know that it is a kid-friendly subject. They want to know that it's a unique idea, that there are going to be good quality poems, and that it's layered. You've got poetry, you have the sidebars. You're going to have some beautiful illustrations. You're going to have some back matter, glossary. So like there's several different things going on, and I knew that there had to be some sort of narrative to kind of tie it all together. I mean, some poetry anthologies, it's a collection of poems, and it's wonderful. It's great. Like we did that with Construction People and School People. They were poems about all the people that you meet either at school or at a construction site, and that was the way it is. But those anthologies were bookended with poems about the buildings themselves. So it sort of created a sort of a narrative in a way. And so I needed to create some kind of thread to keep this all together. I couldn't just have random poems scattered throughout the book. And I knew there were 21 or 22 subjects that I wanted to include. And so I tried to group them. And so I grouped them as, if I can remember, it's my own book, Rainbows of Light, Rainbow Waters, Living Rainbows, Rainbows of Rock, and Rainbows Beyond. And so those were the 5 categories of poems. So the Rainbows of Light had, Nikki Grimes started off with her poem about actual rainbows. Made sense to start off with that. But then I have a poem about sundogs, and Joyce Sidman has a poem about moonbows. Irene Latham has a poem about gems and crystals. And then we move on to rainbow waters, like the Grand Prismatic Spring and the Morning Glory Pool and Fly Geyser and some of these, like Caño Cristales. We move on to living rainbows, which is the animals and the plants, the rainbow eucalyptus trees and the peacock mantis shrimp and rainbow fish that Laura Purdy Salas did. We move on to rainbows of rock, like the Rainbow Mountain and the Marble Caves. Alan Wolfe does a fantastic poem about the Marble Caves, which are totally white, but at the right time of year, at the right time of day, when the sun is hitting the water at the right angle, it refracts off the water in these caves, and the caves become multicolored, even though they're white. They're beautiful. And then Georgia Hurd closes out the collection with one poem in the entire category of Rainbows Beyond. There's only one poem, and that's the Rainbow Nebula in the constellation Orion. So there's this theme, and I don't expect anybody to immediately notice this or to read the book and go, "Oh, I see what this guy's doing." But the thought process was, we go from a tiny drop of water and we keep getting bigger. So we start off with the rainbows of light, sundogs, and things like that. Right? Light refraction off ice droplets, water droplets. We move on to the rainbow waters. We get a little bit bigger with the living creatures, the animals, the plants. We get even bigger with the rocks and the mountains and all of that, the marble caves, and then finally it's the Rainbow Nebula. So there is this small to large progression, which hopefully it's there subconsciously. It does create a loose narrative to kind of carry the reader from point A to point B,
or at least a continuity.
Again, that's
right?
one of those things. I knew I needed to do it. I've never done this before, but I knew enough about writing and poetry anthologies and things like that. I knew what I needed to do. I was just hoping I was doing it right.
I am curious, though. It's kind of a two-part question, but at what point in your conceptualization did that emerge? And how do you, with all these poet friends, go about sorting through the subjects that you want to cover and assigning them out? So you've got two of those challenges here: ordering the thoughts and the stories, and then finding the right voices to speak to those.
Right. Well, I researched first. I figured out what was going to be. I mean, I had 3 or 4 ideas in mind, like regular rainbows. The Sundogs poem I actually wrote probably 12 years ago. It was just a poem that I wrote. Never knew what to do with it. And then I come up with this rainbow anthology idea. Oh my gosh, I finally get
Let
to
me create an anthology. Yeah.
Great. So that's crossed one off the list. So, and then there was the Rainbow Nebula, and I had written a poem about rainbow eucalyptus trees for the National Geographic Book of Nature Poetry that J. Patrick Lewis had done back in 2015. So I knew that they were a subject that I needed to include, but I certainly wasn't going to write another poem about them. So I had to do research and figured out, okay, what are some of the subjects that we want to include, and like there's the rainbow trout and there's rainbow fish. I thought, okay, they're both fish. Like, I don't need both fish. There's something called rainbow clouds, which are caused in a similar fashion. They're caused by kind of the same thing that rainbows are caused by. It's light refraction off of water droplets, but they're in the clouds rather than the sky. There's only so many rainbow things that you can include, and we make reference to. They're called iridescent clouds, and I make reference to them in the sidebar to Nicky Grimes' poem. But we don't have a separate subject. It's not a separate poem or anything like that. Because I had to be concise and focused. We have 2 poems about birds because their backstories are so different. I thought it was worthwhile including these 2 birds. I mean, the rainbow fish, rainbow trout, they're both fish. But the birds, on the other hand, we have the Gouldian finch, which was nearly captured to extinction. When they were first discovered, everybody wanted them for their cages at home. So Marilyn Singer wrote a poem called Rainbows in a Cage. So they were nearly captured to extinction because everybody wanted them. The rainbow lorikeet is an invasive species in Australia, and farmers hate them because they destroy the crops. They will decimate the apple crops, the pears. And so you've got this one bird that everybody wanted, and it almost went extinct because everybody wanted it, and this other bird that everybody hates.
That's
and
a
they're
dichotomy.
Both beautiful birds.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a cool, interesting dichotomy. And here's where serendipity works. Like this is pure serendipity. So I contacted the different poets. I said, here's the subject I was thinking I would like you to write about. Unless you have another idea, you may have some other idea that we might be able to work with. But here's the subject I was thinking I would like you to write. And so Marilyn Singer had the Gouldian finch, and Charles Waters did the rainbow lorikeet, and neither one of them knew what the other one was writing. That neither one of them knew the subject. neither one of them had any idea what was going on with the other. And yet they both wrote the same poem form. Their poems are both what are called triolets. And it's a specific there's a repeating line. There's only 2 rhymes in the entire poem. So it repeats. There's different words, but the rhyme sound, there's only 2. And there's a couple of repeating lines, and it's a very structured poem. And they both wrote the exact same structured poem. They both wrote triolets for their subjects, which are both birds, and they're both on the same spread. And it was perfect. And I just,
Wow.
you can't plan that sort of thing. It didn't even occur to me to have them do the same form. Like, why would I care? Just write the best poem you can write. It just turned out they were both triolets, and for the 2 birds, which was pretty cool.
Bet your enthusiasm for talking about this process, I hope, I mean, it's certainly coming out in your expression, how you talk about it, but I'm hoping the recording does it justice, because you're so clearly, I mean, especially in the context of something that has been around in your mind and that you've been working on for so long, you're so clearly passionate about the way that this has come together.
Well,
which just bears remarking on. Thank
you. I appreciate that. I'm glad that it came out the way I was hoping. Because again, like this is not anything I've ever done before. I've participated in them. I've written some children's books before, but this was a whole other kind of animal. And I was just hoping I was doing it right. And one thing I have to tell you is that Rebecca K. Dotlich, so she wrote the poem about the rainbow hibiscus. She and Lee Bennett Hopkins were very close, very good friends, and so when he passed, she was the one that I immediately thought of for writing the poem. And he had many friends. We were all, we all knew him. We all worked with him. We'd all spoken with him. But it was funny. She always, her poems always started the Lee Bennett Hopkins anthologies. Like every anthology Lee would come out with, it always started with a Rebecca K. Dotlich poem. And she had told me several years ago, she said, she would ask Lee, could you not put me at the beginning all the time? Because people are going to think I'm special. and if you knew Lee, his reaction was, well, it's my book and you are special. I'm putting you at the beginning of the book. That's all there is to it. And so I asked Rebecca, would you mind writing the poem about, the subject that Lee was going to write about? And she was very touched, and she said, "Oh, yes, I appreciate you asking." And I said, "And I promise I will put you in the middle of the book." She said, "Oh, that's wonderful." So I kept my promise. I put her in the middle of the book so that she wouldn't have to start. And that's why I had Nikki Grimes, because I really wanted I knew I needed a good poem to start off with, obviously, but having a name like Nikki Grimes with this poem, I felt that was a really strong way to kick off
cachet,
the collection.
Yeah, totally.
So, and it sets the tone. It's a free verse poem. It's a very kid friendly poem, and it's very anybody, kid, adult, we can all connect with what she's talking about. The Saturday of No, where she had all these plans and it's raining and she's bummed out because she can't do everything that she wanted to do. But then at the end, the rain's apology shows up, a rainbow. And I just thought that was a great way to set the tone of the rest of the book.
Yeah. And Matt, I wanted to ask, when you started submitting the anthology, did you go just to this one editor and, you knew that they were going to buy it, or did you sort of shop it around? What did that look like?
Yeah, I think Kathleen was maybe the third editor that I had sent it to. I'd sent it to at least one other. I might have sent it to a couple. I know there was at least one other one I had sent it to, and they liked the idea, but they just didn't feel like they didn't have strong enough feeling to go forward with it. But I didn't know Kathleen Mers at the time, but I actually knew some of the marketing people at Erdmann. So I wasn't a complete unknown to Erdmann's, because I was part of, like I said, Lee had done several anthologies that we were all of the contributors were all part of. And I knew I wanted to dedicate it to him. So the book itself is sort of a dedication to Lee. And so when I was putting this together and pitching it, Um, I had I'm trying to remember the year. So this was 2019. So he passed away in August of 2019, and this anthology that I had participated in with him, Night Wishes, was coming out from Erdman's. And so I contacted one of their marketing people, and I said, with Lee being gone, I realize you don't have anybody to really help promote the book or do any of the marketing. The creator of the book is gone. I said, I'm not trying to like step in his shoes or like take over anything, but I have no problem with marketing. I love promotions and marketing. I spent 20 years in radio. I
kind of the perfect person for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a blog and I've got social media. Like if you would like me to help out, I'm happy to help out. I mean, I contributed to the book, so I'm happy to help out. And Rebecca did too. Rebecca starts off Night Wishes. It's her poem that starts it off. I'm right behind her actually, but she starts it off. So I said, if you need help with marketing, let me know. And they did. We did a video interview where they posted on their blog. I did some other stuff, like social media sharing and stuff. So they sort of got to know me. I don't know if Kathleen recognized my name when she got the manuscript, but I was familiar with Erdman's anyway. And so that's actually why I ended up contacting them, because I'm looking for publishers who are publishing poetry. And
so not necessarily anthologies, just poetry was sort of what you were starting out with.
I mean,
okay.
I mean, if they like poetry, they'll take either a collection or they might do an anthology. It's up to the editor.
Yeah.
Ultimately, It's always up to what the editor needs, whether it's a poetry collection or a picture book or whatever it is. It's up to the editor if they want it or if they need it.
Yeah.
But hopefully it's a publishing company that appreciates poetry. Or an editor that appreciates poetry, because then they, hopefully they get you.
They're not going to know what to do with you otherwise. Right. Exactly.
Right. Well, so that makes me wonder then. So when you promoted, or sorry, when you pitched it, was this already in your brain, like sort of how it was laid out? And like follow-up question, is it laid out like a picture book, or is it, is it longer form? Is it shorter? Like how is it laid out?
So, yes, I think, I don't know if it was Josh or you who had mentioned before about like what came first or how I was organizing. I went through all the research. I figured out which subjects I wanted to include, and then I tried to categorize them so that those categories, I'm pretty sure those categories were in the proposal, saying, here's the first subject, the next subject. And, to kind of give a layout of the progression of the poems. So I tried not to leave anything to chance. I tried to cover all my bases because, again, this is like a one-shot deal. Like I gotta hit it out of the park, and I've got to show an editor I know what I'm doing, even though I didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew enough through all these other genres and things that I've been writing. I knew enough, like, what it should include. And to answer the other half of your question, most picture books are 32 pages. Some of them might be 40. When I came out with Once Upon Another Time that I did with Charles Guigne, it was published by Beaming Books, we formatted that as a 32-page book, but they loved it so much, they actually extended it to 40 pages. So our editor actually asked us to write a couple of more pages so that we could start out to 40 pages. For this, I figured, well, there's poems. Some of these subjects, like the Morning Glory Pool and the Rainbow Nebula, they're going to be pretty big. You're going to need a lot of spreads, and you need to have room for the sidebars, which are going to be on the same spreads as the poems. You're going to want at least a couple of pages of back matter. So I formatted it as actually a 40-page book. Little did I know, and I guess I never really noticed this through the whole editing process. Like we got final art. And I was going through the copy editing phase with Kathleen Mers. We went back and forth. I don't know, at least 8 or 9 emails back and forth, changing a few words, tweaking a few words, changing a few more words, tweaking a few more words. And it was only when it was actually done, and I'm looking it over, and I realized that they had made it. It's a 56-page book.
Oh,
for under
wow.
$20. For under $20 to get a book like this that's 56 pages, that's a serious book right there. And I was floored.
Here's your selling point right there. Incredible value.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can get a picture. I mean, I'm not trying to put down anybody else, but
Sure.
You can buy a normal 32-page picture book could go for $18, $19 these days. This is, I think this is $18.99. It's 56 pages, and you've got all these amazing writers, poets. Alan Wolfe and, like I said, Georgia Hurd, and Irene Latham and Laura Purdy Salas, and all these incredible people. It's it's really high quality writing. I feel like the interloper, and it's my book.
And for this week's book reviews, Josh's review for this week is for JOVITA Wore Pants. And wow, he thinks he hasn't read a lot of picture books with this vibrant and lively an art style in a hot minute. Illustrator Molly Mendoza's detailed, imaginative, and gorgeous art shines alongside Aida Salazar's depiction of Jovita's journey. The framing around pants is a really nice way into some serious subject matter, including rebellion and death, and the book treats both with sensitivity and reverence that keep the reader's attention focused on her compelling journey. John's review this week is This Book is Perfect by Ron Keres, illustrated by Arthur Lynn. A picture book starring Finn the Frog, who thinks his book is absolutely perfect. That is until sticky fingerprints and goopy messes start to cover the pages. Bright and simple art that includes silly chaos makes this a great interactive read-aloud. John gives this 5 flies on a bubblegum splatter out of 5. And my review for this week is for My Dad is the Best by Fran Pintadera, illustrated by Joan Turu. What opens as a classic, My Dad is Better Than Your Dad tale ends with a modern twist that will make your heart soar. The characters are endearing, the battle is real, and the heart is full. Don't forget to get your own reviews and library requests in. It's the #1 way to help an author's sales. And now, back to our show.
I'm gonna use this as a sort of turning point into a more crassly sort of financial question, because on the one hand we've got things that like Kidlit magazines that operate as anthologies. There are submissions, there are collections, monthly, regular spaced editions, and then you've got 2, maybe 3, max 4 people that are involved in individual picture books in terms of how they are, how they're credited when they come out. One, did you understand from a financial perspective how this was going to work when you went into the deal? 2, from a more personal perspective, knowing how you frame it as, you've got a couple of careers that you're balancing here. One, you're really investing your time in picture book writing. You've got the voice stuff and the commercial and marketing stuff that you also do, but also knowing from your own perspective that you as an author and a creator only have so much cachet and ability to spread yourself around in the market. How did you think about balancing, making sure that the people who are contributing are being compensated for their creativity, but then also making sure that this was going to make sense for you financially to see through to the end after it took so long?
Well, I'm trying to think which question to ask first. Having been involved with the Kidlit world since, really heavily since 2012. That's when I left radio, full-time employment, to be a stay-at-home dad. We realized that if you subtracted daycare for 2 kids who weren't in school yet and just my commuting gas, I was netting $150 a month. So it just,
right.
20 years in the business, college degree, and a wall of awards that my department had received, and I was making $35,000 a year, and it didn't make sense. And then I'm on the air, and I'm overseeing commercial production. I'm meeting with advertisers. Like, I'm doing all kinds of work, and it's not
just
paying
woefully
bills.
Underpaid. Yeah.
So I just said, okay, I will stay at home, be a stay-at-home dad, and we realized if I made between $400 and $500 a month, we'd break even. So
that's remarkable.
Okay, who wouldn't do that? So I got into that around 2012 was when I really started making the real strong effort to get published. And again, at that point, it was just poetry. But I got involved with Poetry Friday, this blogging event that happens every Friday. All the children's lit bloggers around, they all sort of connect. One person is the host each week, and everyone shares their links at this one particular blog, which again changes Friday to Friday. And everybody posts about poetry. Maybe they're posting a review, maybe they're posting an interview with someone, maybe they're posting an original poem, or whatever it might be. And so I got involved with that, and I started, meeting people, connecting with people. I got into Facebook, got into Twitter. I'll always remember it was 2012, 2013 that Nikki Grimes started following me on Twitter. I said, "Oh, Nikki, thanks for following." She said, "Oh, I'm happy to. I'm a big fan." And I remember thinking,
"Wow, what a compliment!"
Why are you a fan of me? You're Nikki Grimes. You're supposed to be a fan of me. But wow. She's very. And we've actually collaborated. She's got a couple of books that I've collaborated on that are going to be coming out that I'll be a part of, and so she's part of this book. And it's it's kind of cool that I've been able to meet all these people. But so I'm on social media. I've got the blog, and I've been able to make a lot of connections with the other picture books I've had. I've met other children's like picture book bloggers, children's book influencers, and so I've got a list of folks that I could call on and hope that they would be interested in helping to promote it. Erdman's has a marketing department, and they've reached out to tons of social media influencers, bloggers, and IG people and stuff. So I wasn't worried about the marketing end of it. I can do a certain amount. I've done a lot of interviews and podcasts, and I'm not actively trying to find new voiceover clients. I still do voiceover work. I have some clients. I do a car dealership down in Baltimore. If you ever hear the Tate family Chrysler dealership down in Baltimore, Maryland, that's me. And I do like in-store announcements and Wise Markets and a couple of others. And but I'm not actively trying to find new clients because it's all I can do just to keep up with the children's lit business. And that's really this is what I really love most of all. I'm thrilled that I've been able to be as good as I am. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. I got 12 books over, let's see, Flashlight Night came out in 2017. So in 8 or 9 years, I've got 12 books out, which is pretty amazing to me. I feel blessed. Yeah. I don't know how I did it. So I wasn't worried about that. And as far as the pay, again, I didn't know everything, but I knew enough. So I knew that I would be getting paid in advance, like you always do. If you sign with a publisher for a picture book or whatever it is, they're going to pay you in advance, and they're going to put the book together. But I also knew that they would be paying permissions rights to the individual contributors. I didn't know what that was going to look like, but I knew it was a thing. So we signed the contract, and so I was paid my advance, but they also set aside X amount of dollars to be distributed, however it needed to be distributed, but it was just a lump sum that I could use, that they basically paid me, and then I paid the contributors X amount of dollars to for each of their contributions.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So, and that's one of the reasons why I have 5 poems in the book, not because, and it's because it's not, I have to tell people this, like, I don't know if it's the autism or what, but like, I need to tell people, like, I'm trying to do the right thing, and I'm not trying to make a big deal of myself, but I put 5 poems in because the more poems I wrote, the bigger each person's check would be. I had X amount of dollars.
Because you weren't paying yourself for the poems. You were taking the advance, and then you were,
so I have X amount of dollars I can split among the contributors.
That's really smart, really strategic, yeah.
So if each of them, say each of them were going to get $150 per poem, say. If I can reduce the number of poems I need to have them write, each one of them gets more than they would have.
Right.
And the interesting snap reaction that I had when you said you've got 5 poems in there, it's so Matt can make more money. But that's not the case at all. It's
really smart.
It's a win-win.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's like crowding out sort of. Yeah, no, that's really smart. Yeah.
I did my advance. I didn't need any more money. My advance was my advance. But if I'm going to pay my contributors, I'm going to try to pay them as much as I can. Lee always did that. It's good. It's good business practice, but it's just good human practice. Pay your contributors as much as you can. And like I said, I knew there were 22 subjects that needed to be written, and if I had written one of those, I'd be paying for 21 people, and I needed to pare that down.
So can we circle back really quick, because before we got on, we did touch a little bit on your autism, and you mentioned it just now, and so I wonder if we could talk about that in terms of like the publishing industry as a whole, which I understand is like a gigantic topic to dig into, but like, we talked earlier in the episode about how some, one book took 10 years to get to publication. Another one was delayed 6 months, like that kind of thing. And I know just as anyone in the publishing industry, that's hard. But with autism specifically, how have you dealt with that and sort of like, moved with the publishing, industry as a whole, I guess?
Well, it's funny. So one of the hallmarks of autism, and this isn't the case with everybody, but a lot of folks on the spectrum, they have a really hard time dealing with change or things that aren't going right. Something comes up, something you're planning something, and the plans go sideways, and you just decompensate. And I've had that. That does happen. Fortunately, I'm old enough to be able to recognize that and use some coping skills. They don't always work, but I try. And so, in the case of publishing, you think the book is going to come out on this day, and it turns out it's going to come out 6 months later. Or, you've got, someone said, they're really interested in this book, and then they just disappear and you never hear from them again. Like there's all kinds of things like that go on.
That is the worst. The ghosting is the worst.
Oh, it is. Right. And you're like, what you just said? Like you just, but now.
Yes. Did you die? Are you okay? Like,
did you become a ghost?
My reaction.
Yeah. Is that why you're ghosting me?
Really, how hard is it to be like, actually, never mind? Like anything, or just no. I'll even take that. Like,
annoyed in that situation, and those of us on the spectrum we're super annoyed because that wasn't the plan,
Right.
But the funny thing is, I learned early on that it's not a book until it's a book. And you could say, I just signed with so and so, for my 13th book. Well, until it comes out, it ain't a book. And so I want to get my hopes up, but I don't get my hopes up. And I'm very eager to see the book come to fruition, but I know anything could happen. I already know that nothing is set in stone. And so that sort of dampens it lessens the frustration, because if I kept getting frustrated with delays or whatever, I couldn't survive in the industry. But I'm expecting, like, I hate to say I'm expecting the worst, but you have to expect that something unexpected is going to happen, or you can't just always count on things going according to plan. And so as long as I don't plan, I plan to not plan, if that makes sense.
Yes, amazing.
And I'm fine. Rejection is, people ask me, how do you deal with the rejection, like when you're submitting 25, like with my book, The Thing to Remember About Stargazing, went through 25 rejections, right, before it became a book. And people say, how do you deal with that much rejection? And I say, I've just got a lot of practice. When I do voiceover work, I might submit an audition, and there might be 50 other people submitting their auditions. I've got a 1 in 50 chance of getting it. Who knows? So and that's, you deal with rejection in that way. I've spent when I was in high school and college, and even out of college, I've done some on-camera work. But high school, college, I was doing theater, and you audition for a part, and you may not get it. You may. I was in high school and college guy. There were a lot of attractive women that I've never dated because of the rejection. Like I've lived my life getting rejected, and I'm not saying that to be like negative, but it's what it is. And so you you get used to it. You learn coping skills and strategies, and you roll with it, because you can't submit a manuscript and expect that they're going to like it. And if they reject it, you can't say, oh, well, I'm a horrible writer, I should never have started this, I'm never going to write again. You write a dinosaur book, and maybe the editor already published a dinosaur book, or maybe they don't like rhyme, or maybe they don't like first person. I know an agent who does not like first person manuscripts. She doesn't even know why she doesn't like first. They just don't connect. She doesn't like first person manuscripts. Like you have no idea why an editor is passing on a particular manuscript.
Right.
It's not necessarily because it stinks. There's a whole other variety of reasons why they may not like it. So, it comes with the territory. You expect to. I don't want to say you expect to be disappointed, but you kind of expect that things are going to go sideways, and when they do, it's not a surprise.
Yeah, I'm with you that expecting to be disappointed should not be the norm, but allowing yourself, I guess, to be surprised and pleased when it works out is the version of that, because you're still striving for success, aiming for that, and you don't want to expect the worst necessarily. Just
right. No, but you expect things to not. If you expect things to not go according to plan, I shouldn't say you expect the worst, but expect things to not go according to plan, because things always go sideways, or you have an illustrator who backs out, and then you got to find another illustrator, or the editor leaves. I mean, I have a manuscript that I haven't sold twice, but I've had interest from two separate editors, and they both wanted it, and then they left before we could sign. So
you didn't want it bad enough to stay.
Like two manuscripts, two editors for this manuscript, two editors for that manuscript, and each time, they wanted the manuscript, but then they left before we could sign the contract.
Right.
Could you just hang on until we can sign the contract?
Just make it a book. Yeah, just make it a book first, and then you can leave.
Right. Make it a book, have it come out in a year and a half, and then you can leave.
And also, so just to sort of piggyback on that, so we also just mentioned right before we pressed record about doing school visits and how important representation is, because you had said, you are able to connect with your audience a little bit more on that level. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Well, I just, I don't go around waving the autism flag, but I do mention to kids and adults, and I'm on the spectrum. I don't hide it, because I feel like, and I don't go around mentioning a whole lot of personal stuff like on my social media. I might mention something kind of fun or unusual or something, but I don't go into a lot of heavy personal details. But I felt like at least making the autism known might have been helpful for either adults who know kids or fellow adults who are on the spectrum, and they don't always necessarily understand them, but especially kids who I think kids feel like they're the only one who feels this way or thinks this way or behaves this way or reacts this way. And moreover, kids see autism as being like a kid thing. I don't think a lot of kids recognize that there are adults who are autistic, because we've developed coping skills. And most people wouldn't realize I was autistic. My wife did. We tested. We had my son tested a couple of years ago, and he's on the spectrum. And when we were going through all the questions and learning about like what they're looking for. My wife's a nurse practitioner, so she was a primary care provider, and she knows what to look for. And so I mentioned to her, I said, the more I learn about what they're looking for, like traits about autism, I said, I have to wonder if I'm autistic. And she said, I'm sure you are, but I love you. Wait, well, what? She goes, I had a feeling you were on the spectrum the first date. I said, you serious? Fine, I still love you. It's fine. Okay.
Wouldn't have stuck around this long. Yeah.
Well, but again, she's a nurse practitioner, primary care. Like she was doing an entire workup on me. Apparently, I found out later on our first date. Like she was checking the dilation of my eyes. She was checking my fingernails, looking for streaks on my arms. She was. She was. Doing the whole workup. She's like, yeah, you're autistic, but you're not a drug user. You're okay.
She's conducting a longitudinal study, and she expects the research to be published in a journal.
Right.
My in-depth undercover investigation.
Yeah. Right. You'll get your royalties.
Have you? So, knowing that you're willing to talk about it, but we don't need to go into great detail. But have you understood your own personal diagnosis to be helpful for recognizing and building coping skills? And I ask that for a very personal reason. That Brenna, I'm sure you must share. Both of us have ADHD. My particular flavor is inattentive type. I follow the same path as you, where my child developed this or started to sort of exhibit traits, and then I recognized patterns of behavior in myself, and it's helped me immensely. So I'm curious about that for you as well.
Yeah, well, my wife had asked me, when I told her I wanted to be tested myself, she said, and she was totally in favor of it. She said, "What do you hope to gain from it, or what do you plan to do with the information?" I said, I would just like my life to make sense, to be honest. Like if I am on the spectrum, as you suggest, I said it would just explain a whole lot. And
totally give it like a name. Yeah.
Right. Explain why I get upset about things when they don't go according to plan. Like I have a really, really hard time pivoting. And I know I should, and I know there are tools there. And most folks are like, well, okay, well, whatever, this didn't happen. You just do this other thing. Like it's not that easy. And that's just one example, but there's several character traits that I realize now are from the autism. And when I was tested, I didn't realize they test you like for all kinds of things. They're testing OCD and ADHD, and like they're testing all these things to kind of weed out all these things so that they know it's the autism. And they check they found out your IQ, which I didn't know. So I was tested for my IQ. And so I was going through the test results with the psychiatrist, and she said, "This is really interesting." She said, "You have an IQ of 130, which is like that's the line of demarcation between like the upper end of average intelligence and the bottom end of above average. Like 130 is." She's like, "You're pretty smart. You're in the 98th percentile for cognitive intelligence. However, for verbal memory, I'm in the 25th percentile. I have a horrible memory. Visual memory, if I'm shown something, I can remember it. But if someone's talking and I was paying attention to her during the testing, I know that she's testing my memory. And I'm like trying to remember all the things she's saying, and then I have to recite back like facts. She would give me a 5-line news story. She'd say, okay, well, what was the name of the woman who was mugged, and did they catch the perpetrator, and what time of day was it? And I'm like, I know I'm trying to remember this, and I still can't remember. So I've got the 98th percentile for intelligence and a 25th percentile for memory. But it's
so
totally
interesting.
And yet my wife doesn't allow me to pull out the autism card. I forgot to take out the garbage. Autism, sorry. And no, we were planning on going somewhere, and I'm all bent out of shape because we can't do it. Autism. Like, yeah, that doesn't work.
You didn't get your diagnosis so that you could have excuses for doing things or not.
That's so interesting though, because I wonder, did she like sort of like follow-up question? So is there such a thing as like memory for like the written word? Because that would really inform what we know about your writing and poetry and that kind of thing. So yeah, and you're nodding yes. What did she say?
Yeah, well, they test, and again, I didn't realize this at the time, but they test for verbal as well as visual. So, like, sometimes I would be shown, I think I was shown words, and I had to remember, like, what some of them were, or I was shown pictures, either diagrams or things like that, and then, like, a couple of pages later, I had to, like, maybe draw them or something like that. And so that I did pretty well on. I went 98th percentile for visual memory. But she would give me a list of about 12 words. And she'd say like table, blue, sister, lamp, whatever. And then she'd say, okay, list the pieces of furniture. And I'm like, ottoman? Like, I remember you saying ottoman, right? Ottoman's one. She's like, ottoman was one. Like, okay, I don't know. And so then she would give the same list again. And like, I would remember, okay, like I had ottoman last time. She just said desk. Okay, I remember. Okay, so there's ottoman, and then there's like I could remember maybe 2 or 3 out of a list of, I don't know, it was 12, 16 words. And then we would do that 4 or 5 times. I could never get past 2 or 3. And I knew what the assignment was, and I'm like, I'm paying so close attention. Like, yes. My own wife, and I can't remember.
My husband does this similar thing. Like, he will, if I'm talking to him, because we've had this discussion over the years, right? Like, if he can't multitask. So if I start talking to him, he does this thing where he'll like turn away from whatever he's doing and he like peers into my soul, like trying really hard to like listen, right, actively to what I'm saying and to remember. But he is very similar, like his verbal memory, terrible. But if you give him something, like he's a speed reader and he's really good at remembering text. He can read a library book on like a new thing, ingest it, and then immediately go and like apply it, like easy. And I'm like, I cannot do that. My brain does not work like that. But it sounds very similar. And I'm just like sort of wondering about your poetry, because there are so many different forms of poetry, right? I'm only familiar with, the like basic few, like, verse, limerick, like that kind of stuff that you learn in school. But the one you mentioned earlier in the episode, I'd never even heard before. But I almost wonder if that's like part of your autism is sort of working in behind the scenes, and you're just like, yeah, I can pull that up. I know exactly what that is. This is how many stanzas. This is the rhyme. This is the meter, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably because it is visual. Like, that
so interesting.
It's a certain amount of lines. There's one line that repeats so many times. Like, I can't remember the number of lines. I know there's one line that repeats 3 times. I know that. Triolet, I think, is 9 lines. I'm forgetting. I've written some, and I'm spacing.
Yeah.
But I can pick out a Pantoum. I can pick out a Villanelle. I can pick out.
I don't even know it. I've never even heard of these. Yeah, like. Yeah.
If you hadn't said it, though, Matt, I was going to pause. Maybe we'll do this in the recording. I was going to pause and say, now let's all test ourselves and see if we can remember the term that Matt used earlier in the conversation.
Yes, right. The one from original. I couldn't remember it. I was like, wait, what did
something
you
with
say?
a TR.
I remember watching you do like, there's 2 rhyming and then like multiple stanzas like that. I remember the visual part of it. Yeah. So interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, one final thing. We're coming up on the hour, but one final thing to sort of bring it back around to the way that you handle school visits and out yourself, which we've discussed a little bit. What you've said in terms of identifying yourself as someone with autism on the spectrum, giving yourself that ability to be representation for other kids that you're presenting to, strikes me as meaningful in terms of how my children experience autism in school. And I can't say whether the way that they live with autistic classmates and things is normal or unique to our situation, because I don't know necessarily, but so much of autism in the way that it's presented to kids still is the form of autism that is disabling. I want to make sure that I'm framing this in the right way, but
autism is something less than high functioning.
Yeah, less than high functioning, and that interferes with kids' ability to, navigate normal social interactions that requires assistive devices and things. Right. That's the version of autism that's obviously usually very recognizable, but what you're bringing is this sort of normalizing form of autism that it's not passing in the sense, but it's representing the existence of the spectrum and what a big gradient there is.
It is a spectrum. Yeah. It is a spectrum, and I feel bad for kids like like my son when he was in 6th grade. Middle school was awful. Middle school is so tough for so many kids, and 6th grade was like a dumpster fire in a tornado for him. It was just
poor guy.
All the friends that he knew from elementary school. There you go. Like that's what
I have a 3D for the listening audience. I just got a 3D printed dumpster fire to represent our journey through 2025.
That was middle school for him. But by the time 8th grade rolled around, he was doing better. But 6th grade was tough, and he. And then there's a couple of kids who were on the spectrum as well, but they were not as well functioning as he was. And he came home one day and he was feeling really down because of some of the bullying that he was getting and the kids being mean to him. And he said, these other kids who are having a harder time than He is. We didn't know at that time that he was on the spectrum, because he was just diagnosed, I think, a couple of years ago. So this was about 4 or 5 years ago. But he was in 6th grade, and he says, everyone's, nice to these kids who are having trouble, like, either speaking or they can't do certain things. But he's like, everybody is mean to me. He's like, I wish I was disabled. I'm like, what do you say to that?
Yeah.
I felt bad for him. And yes, autism is a disability, but he's not, it's not the disability for him and I, like it is for others. And so, he's been able to get a rise above that, and he's doing quite well and thriving, actually. Thanks in part to the autism. He plays guitar, he does theater, and he's learning Japanese, and with the autism, like you're all in, right? It's that tunnel focus, and he's thriving with all 3 of those things.
Yeah. It's a good reminder to sort of extend that kindness to everybody, because you don't always know. In fact, if you're the one with it, you don't always know, right? Until sometimes much later in life. Sometimes you get diagnosed in 6th grade, 7th grade, whatever, but you don't always. Yeah. So nobody ever really knows what's going on with someone else, including yourself. So, man, poor kid. Well, I'm really glad to hear that he is thriving now and just doing great. Yeah. And again, we are up and over the hour, but I wanted to circle back and just say again, thank you for joining us for the second time and enlightening about your anthology. I'm so excited. Can you shout it out really quick? Like, when does it come out? Where should we look for it?
Oh, so it's called A Universe of Rainbows from Erdman's Publishing, Erdman's Books for Young Readers, illustrated by Jamie Kristoff, anthologized by me, Matt Esenwine, and it's available everywhere. It came out April 1st of all days.
Oh, it did.
So,
okay.
It is out in the world, and if you Google search A Universe of Rainbows, you're probably going to find several hits, because it's all over social media. Fortunately,
oh my gosh.
I feel incredible saying that, but yeah, it's really been taken off. We're doing well so far.
That's
amazing.
Really fantastic.
Everybody go order it from your library, give it a review, buy it for a friend, a kid, whatever. Yeah. Sounds
and reviews are great. Like, if you can't afford to buy a book and you read something like at the library or somewhere, even no matter if somebody lets you borrow a book and you read it, leaving a review, like either on Amazon or Goodreads, because those are the two, like the big national, international places, just leaving a sentence, doesn't have to be a long review, but just one sentence positively, it really does truly help authors and illustrators to improve the search results and improve the sales. So you don't have to buy the book to help support an author or illustrator. If you like a book, just one sentence is all you need. But thank you guys for having me back.